Hold the applause, hold the applause. Thank y'all. When I found out that we were going to do NIDA's leadership conference in D.C. with our lobbying day on the Hill, I immediately thought of my own congressman, Judge John Carter, and thought it would be a great opportunity for him to come speak to our group and give us an insight about what's really going on in Congress these days from his perspective as a fellow longtime Texan and a district judge also for more than 20 years. I'm so glad he accepted the invitation to join us tonight. You know, when I first met Congressman Carter, he struck me as a genuine advocate for small business and for our industry. As car dealers, we immediately struck up a great relationship, and I know there isn't anything he wouldn't do for us. As evidenced by the fact that he's here tonight, he's had a long day, he's still got a long night to go, and after being on Capitol Hill. Just a couple little things about my judge here. Since his first election in 2002, Congressman Carter has established himself as a leader in Congress who has the foresight and courage to author and support numerous pieces of legislation and that would increase the protection of U.S. citizens and bring justice to those who threaten our freedom of life. I got another little deal here. Yeah. Okay. Go here. Anyway, Congressman Carter's leadership ability has been recognized by his colleagues and others. During his first term, Congressman Carter was named one of the top 5 freshmen in Congress by Capitol Hill's leading newspaper. And the great news is that he was reelected in a landslide in November of 2012 to his 6th term representing Texas' 31st Congressional District in U.S. House of Representatives. Here is Judge John Carter.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here. You know, I was over there just a minute ago having my picture taken. I had 2 car dealers with their arms around me, and I grabbed for my wallet. And then they realized they had a congressman between them, and they grabbed for their wallet. I thank you for letting me come talk to you. They gave me some stuff that you're interested in. We'll talk a little bit about that. You're in Washington at a time when the small businessman is an endangered species. And if you don't know that, you need to be paying attention to what's going on in your life. Because this place is, in the last almost 6 years now, we have been seeing disaster after disaster after disaster fall on the small businessman. And let me tell you, you're part of a group of people that I consider heroes. Because I think what makes, especially Texas, and I'm Texan first and foremost, okay? And if we secede, I'm leaving. But no, the reason I say you're my heroes is because I believe this country has thrived on the chance takers of this world. I believe the people that take a chance, risk it all on their skill and their ability are the people that succeed in this country. And they succeed exceptionally. You know, car dealers, we make jokes about car dealers, not as many as they make about congressmen, but we make them. But the reality is, they're the independent folks out there that are risking their capital to put together their inventory to purchase automobiles and sell them based upon their skill. I believe I can buy that car, and I believe I can sell that car. And I think that spirit is the American spirit. That's why we are Americans. Because we have created a free enterprise system that rewards entrepreneurs and rewards risk takers. You know, I tell people every time they say I'm going to Vegas, I say about the wildcatters in Texas. Well, you may see a lot of money won and lost in Vegas, but that's nothing compared to what a wildcat oil driller will gamble in his lifetime. I'll tell a story, true story. I went down to Sutherland Springs when I was in law school to see what they call a grass farm that a friend of mine's who's lived out in Ozona. They had bought this land to fatten their cattle on. And they were basically irrigating this grass and growing grass and feeding cattle. And it was beautiful. Looked like a Kentucky horse farm. We were sitting out on the front porch, and they had this beautiful road going down to the highway, and a taxi cab. Now, we were at Sutherland Springs, which is out in the middle of nowhere, okay? And a taxi pulls up. We were about 45 miles from San Antonio, I think. And this little fat guy gets out of the taxi in a suit, and Mr. Chandler, who was sitting up there, who owned the place, said, "Well, that's my brother Jim. I wonder what he wants." And he starts walking up, and he tells his son, "Go down and pick up your uncle and bring him up here, see what he wants." Guy comes up there, and he says, "Well, Jim, what are you doing here?" He said, "Well, earlier I came by to say hello, but mostly I need to borrow your phone." And he said, "Where'd you come from, San Antonio? You came all the way out here to borrow my phone?" He said, "I hadn't even got a dime in my pocket. I owe that cab driver. You're going to have to pay him when I get ready to leave." And he said, "Well, you're my brother. Go ahead. You can use the phone." It's one of those spring days when they had all the windows open on the ranch house. The wind was blowing through there. It was a real nice day. We heard him go in there, and he picked up the phone. He called a guy in California. He said, you still got an orange grove you want to sell?" And the guy said, "Yeah." He said, "All right." He said, "I'll tell you what, how much you want for it?" He got the price. He said, "I'll call you back." And he called up this guy, and he said, "You still want to retire in California?" And the guy said, "Yeah." He said, "I got an orange grove that you can buy for $450,000. He said, "Well, that might be all right." He said, "Well, tell you what, I think I know somebody will buy your place for $450,000. He said, "All right." So he called that guy was in New Mexico. Then he called a guy in Texas, and he said, "I found that ranch you've been looking for." He said, "And he'll take $650,000 for it. Will you sell it? Will you buy it?" And he said, "Sold." He hung up the phone. He walked out on the porch. He said, "I just made $850,000. That's my part of the deal I made with all three of those buyers and sellers." He said, "I'm taking that money. I got 1.5% on Allwell. I'm fixing to put it in it, and I'll see you next year, and I'll pay you back all I owe you." And he said, would you take me back down to the cab? He's waiting, and give me some money." And when he left, he said, "You know what? The funny thing about Jim Chandler, he'll do it. He'll make it because he risks it all on his own personal skill." And that's just exactly the way I feel about car dealers. So, and another thing, car dealers, when it comes down to anything that goes on in a small town or even a middle-sized town or a large town, and people need money, they go to car dealers first. "Give us a donation. Give us a donation." You probably donate to more people and more political candidates than just about anybody on earth. And that's a fact. So I highly respect you as individuals and as a group. I want you to know that, because I believe in the risk takers, and I believe if we ever lose our free enterprise system, we've lost the heart and soul of the United States of America. A couple little things they wanted me to talk about. The first one is a good example. There's another good example I'll tell you about too, of what happens when you give complete control of the government to one party. It's called the Consumer Financial Protection Board. There's another one. It's called the Affordable Care Act. This was an agency that wasn't needed. Nobody knows what it does except get in the way of people trying to make a living. I've been a lawyer for almost 40 years. I was a judge for 20 years. And the laws in Texas, we have more laws that protect the consumer and put power in the consumer's hands than you can count on all your fingers and all your toes, just in Texas. We don't need to create new ideas. The consumer is being well taken care of. Take the Deceptive Trade Practices Act, for instance, which gives treble damages plus attorney's fees if you win, which encourages people to get out there and fight for their rights as a consumer. And they do. And they have a place they can go to a court, let a jury decide whether or not they should be recovering. That's not the way this thing's designed to operate. It's designed for this bunch of bureaucrats, radical bureaucrats, to write regulations with no oversight and nobody looking over their shoulder and nobody grading their papers, and put that into law and force people to have to abide by that, I would argue without any due process. Now, I'm sure some lawyer somewhere will figure out some due process, but the point is it was created to basically use the bureaucracy in this town as a harassment factor. We've got enough agencies in this town that harass people for the purposes of harassment. We don't need any more. We need to let people get out of the way. The government can mess you up faster than anything. That we used to like to say that at least they can deliver the mail, and that's gone. But you know what? We can't. With the exception, one exception, I'm going to have to say, the one thing this government does do well is we fight wars well, and we produce good armies, good Navy, good Air Force, and good Marines, and they've proved it over the last 10 years. Let's don't ever forget about them. One of the things that they're trying to do here, one of the things that's blocking what they're trying to do is that the Republicans have yet to name their members to the board, and they have to have a majority to take a vote. So far, they're just messing with you, but we'll try to keep them from messing with you. But the issue of whether or not you can make a loan to somebody because they got good credit and give them a better loan rate than somebody that's got bad credit is about as much of a common sense decision as you can think of on this earth. We just had a mortgage crisis that almost brought down our entire economy, and the reason we had that mortgage crisis is because the government said you will loan to everybody equally, no matter what their credit rating is. And they said, as long as you let us insure it, we'll do it. So there's your insurance. Of course, that insurance kind of went away as the insurance company went broke. But the bottom line is, that's a good business decision. These people don't have any business being able to have the authority to come in and punish someone for making a good loan to a good customer. And it would harm your business. This last in, first out accounting. There's a whole bunch of folks up here like to mess around with that. And I don't know, you guys got a whole lot of secrets that I don't know about, but I do know that that's a accounting procedure that most of you depend on. That's good legal accounting. And the only reason that somebody would look at something like that is because there are people up here that the only thing they care about is revenues. And that's a nice word for taxes. And any way they can find a way to stick their hand in your pocket one more time, they want to do it. And we will protect this accounting practice. And I think we have the votes to do so in the House of Representatives. I'm on two bills that might be of interest to you. I sponsored H.R. 2455, Cafe Standards Repeal Act. The issue of cafe standards has gone crazy, and it's now falling under EPA, the California rules, and other things to determine cafe standards, when that's not the way it was designed to be. We had legitimate cafe standards under a legitimate agency, and quite honestly, I'm opposed to this expansion of cafe standards, and I've got a bill that's been introduced to say so. And then the Renewable Fuel Standards Elimination Act, 1461, which basically takes on ethanol and says that it's estimated that corn-based ethanol caps the amount of ethanol that can be blended in the conventional gasoline at 10%. It requires EPA to set biofuels levels at production levels. This is a very subsidized area, and I got corn growers in my district. But you know what? They also realize this has gotten out. The ethanol business is getting out of control, and if you put more than 10% in gasoline, I think you get a negative return on the quality of the fuel that you're putting in the car. And there's also an awful lot of things that can happen to that car. I have a story of a guy that had he used to be in Congress. He lived in Arizona, and his grandfather bought a rum runner's boat back in the Prohibition. One of those you see in the movies with the big wooden boats, long nose, twin Chrysler engines in the back. They used them to run alcohol in during Prohibition. It was an antique, and it had rubber fuel lines. He took it over to California, to San Diego, to go out in the bay with it, and nobody told him that they had more than 10% ethanol in their gasoline. And so he was cranking it down out there when his oil lines and his fuel lines dissolved and burned both those Chrysler engines up in that antique boat. So you can do things, you have to do things right and not wrong. Those are just three things that I had on here that I knew you might be interested in. The other thing I want to tell you, and then I'm going to sit down. We make jokes. This is the most serious time in American history in this country, and we have to pay attention. We do a lot of talking about what we call Obamacare. Excuse me. When I get to Washington, my allergies come back. I think I'm allergic to politics. But the reality is this is a serious time, because we're talking about 1/6 of the economy, and you've heard, if you turn on the television or the radio, you've heard the talking. This is more, but let's talk about it as it relates to people. If we haven't done this thing right, we shouldn't have it out there killing people's policies. Because, as you all know, we all know, that if you're sick and you lose your insurance, it's got to come out of your pocket. And these people that are getting put out of off their policies, if Obamacare doesn't come up to pick up the slack, and they're being treated for cancer or for kidney failure or any ongoing procedure, or just they're sick and going to the hospital on that day when it's declared we can't do it for another year, just think about what happens to that poor person that's in that hospital. Because all of a sudden, the insurance company has dropped them, and we don't have the government to pick them up because of poor planning, and the result is that family could go into bankruptcy or suffer. And I tell you this story because the real facts are that in that bill and this consumer protection bill, there's not one Republican vote for either one of these bills. There's not one Republican amendment. They didn't offer us any. There's not one Republican participation in either one of these bills. They were done strictly by one party. Some of you are Democrats, God bless you. But one party only doesn't write an effective piece of legislation that governs 1/6 of our economy. And if you think about that, why would you do that? It's for the issue of power. You are in a city where power is the most important thing to most people around here. And that's a fact. But power in the hands of folks that will not share the power as designed by our founders is the road to disaster. And it's our job, but it's also yours. You are important because you are part of this government. Remember, we, the people of the United States, formed a government, and we are a government. And in a republic, you govern through the person that represents you. And you stay involved. I'm glad you're up here. I'm glad you're staying on top of what's going on, not only for your industry, but for your life. I want all Americans to get involved, and then let the cards fall where their way, which direction this country is going to go. But I want it to stay on the path we're on of freedom and free enterprise, and the ability for the guy who has faith in himself to go out and start a business and gamble it all and make it work. God bless you for doing that. You're the stalwarts of our economy and the stalwarts of our country, and we appreciate it. Thank you.